Good evening and welcome to Across the Pitch. We're the soccer show for people who think American Outlaws was a movie about the Civil War. This part was recorded separately from the interview, and Aaron was unable to join us for this part of the recording. So, on tonight's show, we talk about a terrible interruption in the EPL schedule, a guy who is not Colin Farrell but may in fact be George Washington. We talk about a second-rate team and whether or not nepotism exists in international soccer. But first...
Hey, that was a good shot, man.
Now, Matt, tell us a little bit about our guests that we're going to be talking to tonight.
Yeah, we had the privilege, maybe the honor, to sit down with the president. Both, probably, because he is George Washington, the American Outlaws George Washington. So we had the privilege, the honor to sit down and chat with Ryan from American Outlaws, the Phoenix chapter, all things U.S. men's national team, Greg Berhalter, and young players.
Let's talk to Ryan. He has a lot of great stuff to talk about.
All right. Well, I'm pleased to welcome a special guest to Across the Pitch. We have Ryan Shira. He is the president of the American Outlaws Phoenix chapter. You might know him on Twitter as AO George Washington. He's the guy that dresses up at George Washington at all the national team games. On top of that, he is the co-host of a couple podcasts. One is called Shat the Movies, and the other is called Shat on TV. Quality. I would encourage you to go over and listen to those. As we've been talking to Ryan before we started recording, he was letting us in on what they do, and it sounds pretty interesting. I personally can't wait to check it out. So Ryan, thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for sitting down and talking with us.
Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Great to have you on board.
I appreciate it. I don't know how special I'm going to be, but no, I always love being a podcaster myself. I know how much of a labor of love this is, and I just want to applaud you guys for being that local voice for soccer and doing this and growing the sport here in Phoenix. I just love it. I love being part of it, so I really certainly appreciate you guys inviting me on.
Well, thanks, man, and we
appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, we're glad you're here. So before we dive in talking about the national team, of course, we all know Phoenix is hosting the national team here on Sunday as they play Panama. Before we get involved with that, Ryan, can you just tell us a little bit about your involvement with the American Outlaws organization? How long have you been a part of that?
Yeah, great question. So I was that weird guy that would try and invite his friends to go watch soccer at bars. My first interaction with international soccer was back in '94. I was living in Orlando. I grew up mostly in Florida, and in Orlando, they hosted the World Cup matches there in '94. So we went and we saw, I believe the match was Ireland versus Mexico in the Citrus Bowl. And if you know anything about the Citrus Bowl back in, old school, like early 90s, it was just a cement structure with bleachers. And it was super hot that summer. I think there are documentaries that talk about that match. All I remember is we were in the 400 section. Everyone is either Irish or Mexican, and everyone's just plastered drunk. And of course, I'm young, I'm 13, I can't drink yet. My parents weren't big drinkers. So we're just, slurping down sodas. And I see with my young eyes what appears to be some sort of trash is being thrown from the sidelines onto the pitch. And it's mostly from the Irish team bench. And I'm like, what is going on? What was happening? And it's so funny if you go back and you watch these old games, all the Irish players were sunburnt at the end of it because oh my God, the on-field temperature was 110 degrees. But what they were doing is they were throwing out water bags, plastic water bags. So as a player would swing by, they would pick up the water bags and they would drink the water and they would continue on. I was like, this is crazy. And then how soccer fever gripped the nation for 4 years. And then kind of fell off the face of the earth, at least here in America. We had the Tampa Bay Mutiny and the Miami Fusion, but that didn't really stick. They folded. But I would always really follow the U.S. men's national team. '98, we had a fairly decent run. It wasn't very strong, but in 2002, I had just graduated college and I was in Orlando. I was was working in entertainment out at Disney World and Universal Studios, and I would always invite people to come and watch with me at the Orlando Ale House. No one would. Like I had to like convince the bartender. I had to like slip him a 20 and be like, hey, put on the World Cup. And that's, if you remember, like the handball game or it was just a beautiful, magical run in 2002. And from there on, I was hooked. And right around the 2010 World Cup is kind of when it exploded, and I would try and lead a lot of people to come and watch soccer with us down in International Drive at one of our little, one of the Irish pubs there. And we had just had a great time. And then when I moved out to Phoenix in 2011 for work, I needed a way to meet people. And that's the beauty of American Outlaws, is a lot of times the first, at least here in America, growing up, if you're American, the first time you interact with the sport or you're shown the sport, it's through the international team, because we didn't have a very strong league. You know, people who are Generation X or older millennials. I was like, well, how do I meet people in Phoenix over 30?
Yeah.
So you got to get involved in a group. So I joined American Outlaws Phoenix. I started going to the old 16th Street pub, and I don't want to say that like the leadership wasn't very inviting, but like I'd go there, no one would like greet me or like anything like that. So keep going to games and matches, you know, watch parties, and I barely talked to anyone. And so finally, right around the 2014 World Cup, we hosted in Glendale, USA, Mexico in April. It was a hell of a match. It was
remember that, man.
I reached out on the Facebook page, Odin Domingo, who everyone, if they don't know Odin, you should know Odin. He's the best. He was vice president of AO Phoenix at the time. And he's like, hey, we're looking for volunteers. And I said, listen, I'm your guy. I'll come in, hang out, do whatever that takes. So I banged on a drum there at USA Mexico, and then was part of all the watch parties. And during the lead up to the watch parties, it was right around the same time that Comic-Con was happening in downtown Phoenix. And my cousin was visiting me, and I was like, hey, you know how people dress up when they go to Comic-Con?
Yes.
I was like, hey, we're going to go to Comic-Con, then we're going to go watch USA, one of their final matches before they go World Cup. What if we dressed up like George Washington and Abraham Lincoln, but like in soccer gear? And this
I feel like I've run into you before, mate. I was at Comic-Con that year.
And so we went to Comic-Con dressed as George Washington and Abraham Lincoln, and people like ate it up. It was great. We met a couple of our artist friends, Rob Osborne, who does all Americana type art, and then has since transitioned to do a lot of stuff for the American Outlaws, a lot of like the night before party posters and USA Mexico matches, a lot of our t-shirt designs, like he designed our logo, really cool stuff. Then we're watching 2014. Unfortunately, I didn't go to Brazil, but you know, here I am dressing at the Tilted Kilt, which is where we used to have our watch parties in downtown because it's the biggest bar. I'm dressed as George Washington, and it's that 2014 that Teddy Roosevelt comes in, and then like it's like, oh, of course.
There we go.
Yeah, because Mike looks exactly like Teddy Roosevelt, and I look like a guy dressed as George Washington. But yeah, no, that's kind of like how I got all started with AO and AO Phoenix, and then eventually, you know, some of the other guys had life events like a baby, and they grew up and all that kind of stuff, and I pretty much stayed the same. So I'll take over the chapter if you guys don't want to do it. So now I dress like a president, and I am the president for the Phoenix.
That's
chapter.
Awesome, man.
Very cool, very cool. Awesome.
For our listeners out there who haven't experienced a national team game or who live in Phoenix, as a personal recommendation, I say next time they host a watch party, get out to their bar there, hang out with them. They're a great group of guys. It's a lot of fun. You're singing, you're cheering. They do raffles and everything, and it's great. They're a friendly group of guys, so that's awesome.
Yeah.
Give that location one more time.
Well,
for
they
the
just
listeners.
moved bars, actually.
Yeah.
They're now at Duke's Sports Bar, I believe it's called.
Yeah, and it's guys and girls. So we watch the women's as well, and we have a large contingency of women. But right now we're in between bars.
If you want to see a victory, then that's
Yeah.
where you want to go watch the women's game.
It's much more fun to watch the women's games. It's I tell you what, even to go to the women's games is so much better. So right now we're watching at Duke's, which is in Scottsdale. We're currently in negotiations with Walter Station Brewery, which is a new brewery that's going to open. It's on 40th and Washington, I believe. 40th and Washington. Imagine that.
That's perfect
right?
for you.
So it's right off the light rail. It's right near, right near the airport stop location.
Awesome.
Yeah, great group of guys, brand new brewery, and we've been looking for a home that's a little bit more local. The reason we were at the Tilted Kilt is the previous leadership needed a big place because 2014 World Cup, if you remember, it was just crazy. 30 minutes before every game We were at capacity at Tilted Kilt, which is over 400 people. We sold out another bar, the Gypsy Bar, Lucky Strike over there. Like it was just packed.
Oh, I've been there before. Got a bowling alley in there. That's a big place.
It was crazy. It was nuts.
Yeah.
Since then, obviously, we missed the 2018 World Cup and fandom for the men's.
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, exactly, right?
I've been giving these guys shit about it for weeks now. Well, months, actually.
So it's kind of cool because you have I don't want to call them fair weather friends, but the people who may have only been interested because we had that excitement in Brazil in that 2014. The real true fans now are the ones that are kind of sticking with the team. And it's kind of cool because you're getting smaller crowds. You're getting a little bit more like personal at the watch parties versus like, oh, there's 300 people and I can't get a seat. So I think that's why Walter Station Brewery is going to be a really cool spot because number one, their beer is pretty good and they're like bending over backwards to do whatever I want. In fact, or whatever we want. They're donating beer for our tailgate for the USA Panama. It's really cool.
That's all we need here.
That's awesome. So where can they find you guys at? What's your guys' social media links?
Yeah, so we're on Twitter and Instagram. Just follow AOPHX. We're on Facebook. Just search for American Outlaws Phoenix. And then our web store is AOPHX.ECWID, I believe. ECWID. I don't know. I'll give you the links and you can put them in the show notes or whatever. But
awesome.
Yeah, that's all our information there.
That's great, man.
Ryan, I got a question for you.
Sure.
Do you have an English Premier League team you support?
So I'm a Gooner.
Hey! Oh, yeah! That's good because if you weren't, the show was about to be over. So good.
Yeah. I think in Phoenix, the top three teams, at least from a supporter, actually, I guess there's four, right? You have the Gooners, Arizona Gooners, strong group. You have Man City, you have Man United, the Phoenix Red Devils, and then you have the Liverpool. Those seem to be the four active big groups here in Phoenix.
Matt, anything to add there, mate?
Yes, we're the only team in London with a European Cup.
Very good.
But yeah, the Arizona Gooners are great. Great group of people. If you're a Gooner, go out to Yucca Tap Room. Just fantastic over there.
Yeah, I was out there last Saturday. It's a great time out there. They close off the whole side of the bar, and they've got a big screen up. You want to learn all the chants before you go down there because they'll be singing.
Yeah.
And
I hear it wasn't such a good time at Jersey's over there in Chandler, Matt.
We were carefree, man.
Obviously, we missed the World Cup this past year in 2018, but where we played against Ireland and France. And so I took that as an opportunity to go. Like 6 of us went from Phoenix out there. And while we were there in between Ireland and France, we stopped over in England and got to go visit Emirates Stadium and take a tour. And it was such a cool experience. And they just do it right there. We got to go like on the field. We can't go on the field, but a sliver of the field and take pictures on the bench. It was really neat. It was a cool experience. See the locker rooms. I highly recommend it. It's on the London Pass. I highly recommend getting the London Pass.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
It's always cool when you get to go and see your home team's ground.
Yeah.
I have to say that. I got the chance this past year to go to Stamford Bridge. And like you said, standing in the dugout, going inside the locker rooms, it's just a magical experience.
Yeah.
So speaking of special experiences, this coming Sunday, January 27th, depending on when you're listening to this, at 6 p.m., our U.S. men's national team hosts Panama. It's the very first game of 2019, and it's right here in the Valley. Mm-hmm. And so, Ryan, being the president of the American Outlaws chapter here in Phoenix, what's the preparation been like getting ready to host American Outlaw chapters from all over the country who are going to fly in, descend upon State Farm Stadium for that game? What have you guys been doing? How hard has it been? What are the challenges you've been facing?
Yeah, if anyone's watched any of the Fire Festival documentaries, it's a lot like that. You have very limited time because you would think that like the amount of money that U.S. Soccer brings in, and they talk about all how much budget they have and their surplus and all that. You would think that they would get their act together in terms of being able to confirm dates and all that kind of stuff. We were informed there was a rumor that there could be a match here. I think I got that notification back in late October. And I was like,
well, I mean, they take 2 years to name a coach. So.
It's tough to believe that this is how they act, right? So it really truly is like it's not as organized as you think it would from a U.S. soccer perspective. Once it gets to the supporters, once things are locked in, then we can start spending money and organizing. But we got the final confirmation sometime in like the first or second week of December. So imagine, if you will, it's almost Christmas. They don't know when the ticket link is going to go out. And they announced the Women's World Cup tour that they're doing across the country, which is 10 games in every city, it seems like, from coast to coast. So they announced that at the same time that they announced the January Cup. The January camp games are 2 games, and they announced San Jose, which is February 2nd. They announced that like back in October. So we're like almost like the redheaded stepchild of the January camp. I apologize to any redheaded stepchildren out there listening to this, but it truly is. It's like, oh, and by the way, yeah, we'll kick off the Berhalter era in Phoenix, and you would think that like they would try and make this a thing, like, you know, this is truly a new era. So we have to do things like, first of all, it's very autonomous. Like, we have really, AO National says it's up to the chapter to lead the TIFO effort, to lead the night before. Where do you guys want to have all these things? If you need us, we're here for you to support. But ultimately, we want you guys to showcase the best parts of your city.
Yeah.
And we really want to put on a good show, because you think of all the things that are happening here in Phoenix in terms of soccer and the community. You know, we've got a USL squad that went to the finals and almost won the championship last year. We're trying to get that last MLS bid, be Team 28. Some people call it the unholy alliance between US soccer and MLS. You look at other cities that have hosted US men's national team in either friendlies or tournaments, and when they can bring out big crowds, it really puts a spotlight on the city. Like, for instance, St. Louis all of a sudden now has got their act together from an MLS bid, and they've already sold over 50,000 tickets to the women's match that's happening there.
Yeah.
Some people will argue, well, does that really have an impact on whether or not an MLS will give you the bid? Some people say yes, some people say no. I'm more in the camp that say it can't fucking hurt. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
it can't, like,
right. Bit of organization here, lads. Yeah.
Exactly. So we start the organizing. We have to start the TIFO. You have to design the TIFO. What's the message? What's going on, behind it? What do we want to send from a support perspective? Can it get approved by the stadium? Can it get approved by US Soccer? Unfortunately, it does have to go through US Soccer because whatever their requirements, but there's a lot of autonomy that we're provided. So then you have to get the merch ready. You have to design a scarf. You have to get t-shirts. You have to organize a tailgate. So there's all these things that we did, and we've done this 3 times under myself and the board members. And it really takes community. Luckily, we've done this a couple times, and we've got some great members and great volunteers, not only in AO Phoenix, but also that cross-pollinate into some of the other supporter groups here in the Valley. That's the one cool thing, is like, there's no like Green Street hooliganism between all of us. Like, if you're a Gooner or you're in Man City, who cares? You just love soccer, and there's some light ribbing, but ultimately at the end of the day, we all want to help each other. So we had some people from the Banditos group. We've had people from the Red Fury come out, lend their assistance, whether it's painting with us. So it's been really cool. It's been a really neat experience to see all these people come together. And we were talking today, it's like, hey, we've got T-minus 3 days and everything is ready to go. Everything is organized. Like, it's crazy. So all these things are coming together to really showcase the soccer community here in Phoenix and the support that we have for our national team. And I just think it's a brilliant experience. I'm happy to be a part of it.
That's something you don't see in a lot of other sports, and even in a lot of other just organizations.
Yeah.
Just the camaraderie and the bringing together of people, like you said, that are from different walks of life, not only job-wise or socioeconomic, but even supporters group-wise, coming together to support our national team, to help out a great foundation. And so it's cool to see, man. I've been enjoying following you guys on Twitter and seeing kind of the updates on the TIFO.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for what's going on.
Yeah, I'm excited for you guys to see it. It's a big one. It's 60 feet by 30 feet banner that we're going to be unfurling after the national anthem, and it's a pretty cool message. I think it hopefully will be well received.
Great, man. Great. So speaking of that, what kind of atmosphere can those who have never been to a national team game expect on Sunday inside the stadium?
I mean, the cool thing about State Farm Stadium is it's a dome.
Right.
It does have the retractable roof, but I mean, it might be open. Who knows?
But you have real grass.
You have real grass. I think it's the perfect stadium. I think it's the best stadium in the nation, especially when it comes to the amenities and what you get. You get real grass, you get climate control. They can open up the roof if they want. I think it's brilliant.
I think for me, the thing that shocked me or surprised me, and I've been to quite a number of grounds around the world, including the Olympic Stadium in Sydney, which held 110,000 people, 120,000 people at the time. was the noise inside of that
Yeah,
stadium.
it gets loud.
Yes.
It
Oh,
gets
it's
loud.
incredible. You could you feel the noise heaving in your chest, the vibrations pumping in your chest as you walk into the place. It's quite incredible, actually.
The cool thing about going to a national team game at State Farm Stadium is, like you said, everything is amplified because of the noise, and we are the only noise in town. It's unlike when you go to a Cardinals game and they pump in, Panama from Van Halen on the, or like get up and cheer, all that kind of stuff, or the air raid siren, I guess, when they have, because it's, the Cardinals. We bring in our drums, so we're super loud. In fact, when we hosted the women's, when they last won the World Cup in 2015, they did like a tour, like a victory tour, and one of the last games was here in Phoenix, and we're drumming, we're really loud. If you go back and you watch the replays of it, you could just hear us nonstop for 90 minutes. But we were getting tweets from this one guy who was like, University of Phoenix Stadium, they're tweeting at University of Phoenix Stadium, the account, and they're like, I didn't know that there would be drums here. Can you tell them to stop?
Oh,
and that just made us go even louder. So I think what you can expect if you're in the supporter section is people standing for the full 90, chanting. There might be a couple of beer showers if we score a goal. It's just a fun time, and it's all ages too, right? We don't discriminate.
That's a very important point there. It's very family friendly. I mean,
yeah, I mean, we got a couple chants that say, USA ain't nothing to fuck with, but listen, we like to think of ourselves as PG-13.
That's great, man. I know it's always been a fun experience for me. I was at the US-Mexico game. Man, that was a while ago now. We sat kind of kitty corner to the American Outlaws. We were still chanting with you guys, even though we weren't in the supporter section. And so that's kind of the amazing thing about it, is that atmosphere that's created in that section really spreads around the rest of the ground, and you just get caught up in the excitement of it. Well, Ryan, one of the things you mentioned earlier was that this is Greg Berhalter's debut as the new U.S. men's national team head coach. And so someone who's really involved with the U.S. men's national team, what are your thoughts on his appointment?
I'm a Tab Ramos fan, and looking at what he's done with the youth national teams and the U20s and the U23s, and looking to see how he's developed, and also he was a former player and he's been part of the organization for such a long time. I would have liked to have seen him get the nod.
Yeah.
But maybe it's not his time.
Right.
I would have also liked to have go after Tata out of Atlanta. I think we were maybe due to have someone who is bilingual, could tap into the American Latino soccer community, and maybe we're overdue for that as well.
Yeah.
But, Greg Berhalter, I don't know as much about him as other people do. I don't know what the obsession is with hiring U.S. men's national coaches that are bald.
What's wrong with that, mate? Hey, hold on. Let's not be baldest about it, okay?
Can I jump in with a couple things that I had heard on Berhalter, and I wondered your thoughts. And now, one thing that you mentioned was interesting regarding the bilingual is I do know that the U.S. men's national team, that they specifically wanted a English-speaking coach. That was actually one of their qualifiers. They also had a requirement that whoever it was had to be willing to live in Chicago. I think that goes back to the Jurgen Klinsmann era, where he was kind of flying in from Los Angeles once in a while. And then also with Berhalter, I understand there may have been a bit of nepotism involved.
Ooh.
His brother is a high-ranking official.
Phil, stop that. Are you saying there's nepotism in soccer?
Yeah.
Get out of here, mate.
Jay Berhalter, the brother of Greg Berhalter, is U.S. soccer's highest-ranking official. So basically, the two brothers are the top two guys right now.
I didn't know all of that, to be quite honest, but it would make, I mean, it doesn't surprise me when it comes to U.S. soccer. Look at what happened with the Gulati when there was all the fan uproar about like, hey, you got to get Sunil out of there. We got to get some new blood. And then they held a presidential runoff, but at the end of the day, it went to his second in command. Is anything really going to change? And it doesn't surprise me. I mean, Berhalter's hiring was the worst kept secret.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if he produces results, Berhalter seems to have had a modicum level of success in MLS.
Yeah, I like the way that his teams played in Columbus.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm optimistic about the future. I'd like to see him. I'd like to see what he does in the January camp, but also knowing that this probably won't be the final squad that we send to the Gold Cup. We start the new World Cup cycle this year. I mean, this is it. This is the start of the new era. So we're stuck with Berhalter.
I wasn't trying to cast a shadow or anything. I just thought these things were worth mentioning. That was all.
Fair enough.
It's definitely good to hold the soccer federation's feet to the flames because as a supporter, I can't tell you. I mean, listen, if you can't make the World Cup out of CONCACAF, something's wrong. And I think we all know that it really starts at the top with the governing board. And, I don't like to, I like to be a supporter first and foremost, but also I think being part of a supporter is being able to acknowledge when there needs to be a change.
Yes.
And and certainly the last thing we want is corruptness at a high level because ultimately it holds us back.
Right.
You're saying you can go and check your tinfoil hats in at the door at the State Farm Stadium and pick them up on the way out. See how it goes from there. Huh?
If they go out and they score 4 goals and give up none against Panama, all this hubbub and all this stuff will be put to rest. At the end of the day, if he produces results, great. I'm a little worried about his use of Will Trapp, knowing what I've seen of Will Trapp. But listen, if there's anyone who knows how to use Will Trapp, I guess it's Berhalter.
It is a results-driven business.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what this comes down to. For me, Berhalter, like you said, it was the worst kept secret in U.S. soccer this past year. But it's still an interesting selection for me, knowing who was out there. You mentioned Tata Martino, who, of course, has been named the Mexican national team coach. I'm on the fence about Berhalter myself. I don't know if he's necessarily the guy that can take a new group of players, a new player pool, and push them to where they need to be. But hopefully I'm wrong because I want to see the U.S. succeed. Like you said, Ryan, there is no reason why we shouldn't make it to a World Cup out of the CONCACAF region. Just no reason.
Most people can't find Trinidad and Tobago on a map, much less should we be losing at soccer.
Can if you're a cricket fan, Mel.
Because the players didn't want to go in the field because it was beneath them. Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's what fans who grew up with U.S. soccer, especially when in my generation, in our generation, that's what we had to depend on was the grit and determination and hustle. Even though we weren't the most technically sound, we weren't going to dive. We were going to get back up and we were going to press you to get the ball back. We out hustled every team. And to see the U.S. men's national team 1 game away from barely squeaking in the World Cup, post stuff on the Twitter and be like, oh, I can't play in this field. Suck it up. You're Americans.
Right.
You have a job to do. Get there and do it.
That's really interesting. I can only draw parallels to the Australian experience here with the Socceroos. That was one of our qualities was that, we may not have had that much talent, but we just had grit. We had determination, and that usually got us through, and then something changed. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was a couple of World Cup appearances in succession there, and all of a sudden that seems to have gone, and now we're barely scraping through against Uzbekistan in the Asia Cup. What happened?
Syria. Didn't that one go into penalty kicks?
We went. It was against Uzbekistan. We went into penalties.
That's like the 5th most famous Stan after Accrington Stan.
I see what you did there, Phil. That was good.
I think that's an interesting thing to bring up, Ryan, is the fact that the 2002 World Cup team probably was less talented than what we had trying to fight for the 18 World Cup. And yet those guys would go in and fight. And we've seen this shift in the players that have been playing for the U.S. recently. And now we have a new 23-man roster filled with a lot of players who haven't played before with the crest on their chest. We have 11 players coming into these 2 games with no caps whatsoever. That's no appearances for the national team. We have 19 out of the 23 who have under 10 appearances for the national team.
This is great. I'm going to jump in there and say this is great for US football.
I'm a fan.
Right now is the cycle that you want to start blooding those young players so that they get that experience before the next World Cup. They're probably not going to do too well in CONCACAF. Who cares? You're rebuilding the team. You're starting afresh. These guys are going to have 4 years experience under their belt by the time the next World Cup comes around. That's forward thinking. I like that.
I recently wrote a blog for Firebird Soccer, which you can find on their website. And by the time you're listening to this, it'll be posted on our website. And in that blog, I outlined 3 players that I think we need to be watching this coming Sunday. But Ryan, my question for you is, who are the 3 players that you think we should keep our eyes on?
Oh, I believe it's Michael Bradley, it's Jazzy Zardes, and no, it's not. It's not those guys.
I was like,
Just
where are you
really,
going with this?
I'm totally kidding. Totally kidding. So glad they're there. Honestly, I'm of the belief that it's not just 3 players. I'm looking forward to just seeing some of the new guys. To be quite honest, a lot of the guys I haven't followed that much. You get Christian Ramirez, who plays for LAFC. He's 27, but this is his first appearance for the men's national team, his first call up. Like you mentioned, there's a lot of guys that are getting their first look. A lot of the players that you're going to see in the January camp probably aren't going to be part of the Gold Cup squad that you'll see later this summer. But I think it's important that you set the tone and set a culture that says if you come into camp, you work hard, you do the right things, you can earn a spot here. I mean, we've seen it. I mean, there's been lots of interesting players that came into January camp and then were starting for the team in future games. So I think that's going to be the cool thing to come out of it. Who are the guys that are going to shine in January camp that are going to get the call up later this summer for the Gold Cups? I don't have my eye particularly on any one per se or any 3, but I am interested to see, hey, what's that name that no one was thinking that's going to be good? I'm interested to hear what your 3 were, not to spoil it for people who want to read the blog.
Oh no, I'll give you my 3. Interestingly enough, one of them was one of the ones that you kind of made a joke about. I went more of like a back to front kind of approach. So I think Zach Steffen is obviously someone. I think he's going to be anchoring. He's going to be playing between the sticks for the U.S. for a lot of years to come.
Yeah, he's great.
My second person was Christian Roldan in the midfield.
Yep.
23, playing for Seattle Sounders. I think he's a guy that's going to take over that box-to-box midfield role that we've seen Michael Bradley play so many times in the past. And then finally, Giassi Zardes, I think, is a guy we need to look at. His career took off again once he got moved to the Columbus Crew. He kind of came out of college, a lot of hype around him. The Galaxy signed him to a homegrown deal, so he stayed there, but he never really took off. All the potential that we were told about was never there. And then he gets moved to the Columbus Crew, and this year he scores 20 goals, has 2 assists, is, I believe, their leading goal scorer. And so I think just, again, reuniting with Berhalter on the national team, being coached by him for the past year, I think he could be that striker that we desperately have needed.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what Zardes. I mean, there's within the AO community, within most of the U.S. soccer community, supporters anyway, there's a thing called the Zardes touch.
Yeah, right.
Everything he touches turns to shit, meaning he's got a very...
Oh, like Phil's mate Lukaku.
Yeah, he's got a terrible first touch. He's got such a heavy first touch. And you need someone who doesn't let the ball get away from him, especially in that front 20. So it's going to be interesting to see if he can duplicate his success that he had under Berhalter at the club level, if he can bring that to the national level. Because while he showed flashes of it in the past, it never materialized to something consistent. What do you think about Acosta being sent home?
You know, I'm torn on it. I was never a big fan of Acosta.
Okay.
I think he might have gotten overhyped a little bit. He had some great showings for FC Dallas, and then he got transferred up to Colorado. I think just where we're at, January camp, lovingly called Camp Cupcake by U.S. men's national team supporters. I think just keeping him there would have taken away a spot from some of these other guys that I think Greg Berhalter really needs to see.
Yep.
I don't think he's done with the national team. I personally think he'll be on the Gold Cup roster. And I think Greg Berhalter was just saying, take off, get ready for the MLS season, get ready for preseason. Just right now, we don't need you.
You know, the great thing about the camp is, again, you get to see all these players that you're like, who is this guy? Who does he play with? And that's kind of the fun of it.
Right.
The U.S. has had so many players, like you've said, that coming out the gate, they were supposed to be just these great players that ended up fizzling out. And I wonder how much the fact that the MLS, for instance, plays on a different schedule than the rest of the world, if that hurts the development of U.S. players. And I wondered if the MLS and the USL were to go on the European soccer calendar, would that help for U.S. players to maybe be able to develop better? Do you think that would be beneficial to the U.S. team overall?
I don't know if scheduling has a major play in it. I mean, I think the advantage that we have with the schedule that we do is when it comes down to World Cup, our players are typically in form, right? It's not our off season. So I think there's maybe a little bit of advantage for us in that respect.
Yep.
I think ultimately what it comes down to is I think it's more or less the competition that you're playing against every day that really determines the skill set of the squad. You look at when Michael Bradley was playing for Roma and he was starting, how his game improved so drastically when he was over there. And you look at guys even in the modern day, you look at the Puliseks, and you know, I'm applauding all of our guys that are going overseas at a young age. You look at the development versus guys that have decided to stay here at MLS and sign a homegrown deal like a Jordan Morris. And you look at the development between him and a Bobby Wood, if you will. It's not hard to see that the guy, when you're playing at a top league, when you come into the national team, the skills that you acquire playing for your club really determine, you know, how well you're going to play for the national team. Do I still believe that we have to have a strong MLS or a strong national league? Yeah. Is MLS where we need it to be yet to transform that success from a league to national team? No, we're not there yet. We're not the Bundesliga. We're not La Liga. We're not EPL.
Right.
I think you can do both. I think you can still develop young talent here at MLS. The great thing is we're a huge country, and so we can have 28 teams in the top tier. And if all those teams have strong academies, then we're developing the young players that hopefully can then go overseas and play, and they're young and develop even further, so that when they come to the national team, we're competitive against the Englands and the Brazils and the Germanys of the world.
Right.
Until we can acknowledge that honestly and truthfully, I think we're going to be in a state of arrested development. And that's what you saw with the 2018 is a perfect example. You saw our top tier players that should be in their prime regress from 2014.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thing. The CONCACAF conference isn't the strongest.
What you see with CONCACAF is MLS is great for CONCACAF. It gives the teams in other countries like Jamaica, the island nations, Canada, US, all those other countries are rising as a result of being able to play in a top league like MLS.
That makes
even
sense.
South America. I would argue we have a stronger league than what's in South America. So you're seeing a lot of South American players from Venezuela, from Ecuador, from Colombia come up and play in MLS, and they're making their teams better.
Yeah.
So MLS is certainly improving countries and it's making CONCACAF stronger, which unfortunately is at the detriment of the Mexicos and the USs of the world who are.
Right.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, I think once we figure out how to unlock it, what's the best way to develop the U.S. players, I think then we'll see the U.S. men's national team just escalate. I mean, you just look at a guy like Tim Weah, who just got transferred to Celtic, and he scored 2 goals in the span of 5 days for them. Scored on his debut coming off the bench and then scored today. And so we have these young guys coming up, Weston McKennie, Pulisic,
Tyler Adams.
I think we have a good core that going into this Gold Cup coming up this summer and then pushing into the next World Cup cycle. I think we're going to see the U.S. men's national team begin to rise. And as soon as those European guys can get together with Berhalter and get a camp that FIFA recognizes under their belt, we're going to see some great growth, man.
It's a new era, not only because it's Berhalter, but it's also a new era of players.
Yes. Yeah.
For all the people who hate Michael Bradley, I'm here to tell you, you're going to have a Michael Bradley on a World Cup squad. Yes. It may not be Michael Bradley, but it's going to be a veteran. You're going to need a veteran there to provide a little bit of leadership to the younger guys. But ultimately, when you look forward to 2022, there's going to be guys who aren't on the team that you've never heard of yet. And then there's guys like your Puliseks and your Adams and your
DeAndre
Yedlins of the world. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's your core. That's the new era. But Yedlin's a veteran, right? He needs to step up and be a leader.
Yeah. He's 27, 28?
Yeah.
Well, in 2022, we might see Landon Donovan return to be that veteran.
Well, I mean,
he did just come out of retirement.
He just come out of retirement. That's right. For the indoor, the soccer.
For the indoor league, yeah.
Yeah.
So with that, Ryan, what do you expect from the U.S. men's national team this coming year? Can we go on record right now and definitively say they are going to lift the Gold Cup this summer?
Oh, jeez. Boy, I don't know if I can.
No.
Look at myself in the mirror and put on a George Washington wig and cap and jacket, say that they're not going to. I think we've got a shot.
Right.
We always have a shot. And I think there's a strong chance here. I think, again, if all goes well and people don't resist the system and buy into it, which I think is what's happening so far, there's a lot of positive things that we're hearing coming out of camp so far. I think that we have a very good chance. This is a meaningful Gold Cup, so we need to win this one.
Right.
So I think there's going to be a push to put our best players on there.
Nice.
Obviously, we got to go against Mexico. Tata is unbelievable. And you look at the Mexican players and what they did in this World Cup, I think they've got a super strong team and they're out for vengeance.
Right.
So that's going to be tough. I think I would love to see a USA Mexico final, and I would love to see USA beat Mexico. And that's what I'm going to predict right now.
All right. I like it, man. I like it. So kind of switching gears here because there's also something else major happening this coming summer. The Women's World Cup in France.
Yeah.
And so our women's team are getting ready. They just completed a couple games overseas, which I think were a little wake-up call for them. Here's my question for you, man. 4 years ago in Canada, Carly Lloyd played a huge role in that team's triumph.
Sure.
I mean, she came out first half hat trick in the final. But looking ahead to this summer, who do you think that one player is that is going to step up and fill that role for these women in France?
Wow. Listen, I'm a Julie Johnson Ertz.
Yes.
Fan. Obviously, she's local here. She grew up in Mesa, Arizona. I think she's a difference maker on that team in the midfield.
Right.
Can not only play goal to goal, score. She is tough as nails. I think is going to be the difference maker. I don't know if she's going to score all the goals. I think Alex Morgan is probably going to score a lot of goals this summer.
Yeah.
You saw what Christian Press did off the bench. Ultimately, I think it's going to come down to a defense. Right? We have to play defense. You saw what happened when France went on the attack, and then we struggled against Spain, who's not as talented as a French team. So if we can play the way that we know we can play, the women's team is unstoppable. We're the best team in the world, hands down.
I think actually,
Milwaukee Matildas. I love the Matildas. I love them.
Sam Kerr is going to really terrorize teams in the Women's World Cup, and I'm really looking forward to seeing her play and the Matildas game. I think this is probably one of the only sports in the world, and it's the women's football, whereby Australia and America probably go head to head, relative equals, I'm going to say. If they meet up in the World Cup, this is going to be exciting stuff to watch.
You think Australia's on the same level as the women's national team?
Yes, I do.
All right.
Hey,
all right.
I'll tell you what. Hey, here's one for you, Ryan. Here's one for you.
All right.
If we meet up in the World Cup, okay, and Australia loses to the US, I will sing a Michael Bolton song. Karaoke.
I am there to witness this. I am there. Count me in.
Ryan, I think you made a great shout there with Julie Ertz, man. I think she is the key to us repeating this summer. And if she can control the midfield, I think we're unstoppable. And then my only other shout would be Becky Sauerbrunn.
Oh, of course.
Sitting back there, anchoring that defense. I think right now she's got the second or maybe third most caps on the U.S. women's national team. So I think those two players are key to our success. I personally see them repeating in the summer. What about you guys?
Nope. There are some really, really, really good squads in there. As you mentioned, France, obviously the US women's team and the Matildas too. I think it's going to be great. I think it's worth watching. This is going to be fantastic.
Yeah, France hasn't lost on their home soil since 2016, and they beat the U.S. squad. So, I mean, you also have Sweden out there with, Pia. So, listen, this is going to be a World Cup to watch, and people think, it's not competitive, and U.S. is going to run away with it. There's a lot of good squads, and that's what I love seeing the development of women's leagues in other countries that are really taking it serious, and you're starting to see the kind of the rising tide. It's a shame that with as good of our women's team that we have, we can't translate to a consistently solid, profitable women's league, which I think is a shame.
I was just going to say, so if you're listening to this and you're in Portland, you're in Seattle, you're in Orlando, go out, support your local women's team, show them the respect that they deserve because they are doing it in the local front and on the national front. And I, for one, would welcome a local women's team here, maybe headed up by Phoenix Rising.
Here. The US women's football team, soccer team, is ranked number one in the world right now, right at this point in time, ahead of Germany, ahead of France, just slightly ahead of Australia. They're world beaters.
They are.
These guys are world beaters. They need to get out and they need to have you.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to not only this game on Sunday, but the Gold Cup in the summer and the Women's World Cup. And I know that I'm going to be heading down to Duke's if that's where the American Outlaws are still meeting to watch those games. So hopefully you boys will join me as well as the rest of the Phoenix soccer supporters here in our great state.
Sounds wonderful.
Hey, Ryan, I just want to thank you again for coming on the podcast, talking with us about the U.S. men's national team. And I'm really looking forward to what you guys are doing on Sunday. I hope it goes well for you. And just thank you again, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. If you want to be a member of the American Outlaws, it's $25 a year and you get a t-shirt and a bandana. So it kind of pays for itself. You get discounts on travel and $5 of that $25 comes locally here to the chapter. That helps us do things like TIFO and buy beers for first timers when they come out to a watch party. And so it just really helps to give back to our community. So $25, theamericanoutlaws.com/membership, select Phoenix as your home chapter.
Awesome.
Come join us. It's a good time. Women's and men's. It's going to be a busy summer.
Yes, it is, man. If you want to follow AO Phoenix on any of the social medias, it's on Twitter and Instagram. It's at AOPHX. And then if you go to facebook.com, just search American Outlaws Phoenix and you'll find them there. So thanks again, Ryan, man. And we hope you guys have a great Sunday and that you lose your voices and drink way too much beer and have to call in sick on Monday morning.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
One thing I did want to mention is when you go to the website, it is theamericanoutlaws.com. Don't forget the
That's right.
at the front.
That's right. Theamericanoutlaws.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, man. Have a good one.
Thanks for joining us.
Take care, guys. Good night.